You have to figure out to belong to a community, not necessarily being involved in the library. I'm not saying go out and dedicate your time to everything, but figure out places that are going to make you happy seasonally so that you have a foundation to what life looks like outside of your home and outside of your car.
Welcome to the House of Germar podcast, where wellness starts within. The House of Germar is a lifestyle brand empowering women to live all in interior design and personal wellness. We are a destination for women ready to reimagine what is possible in their homes and lives and then create it. We are honored to have you join us on our mission to empower 1 million women to live all in. I am your host, Jean Collins, and I invite you to become inspired by this week's guest. Welcome to the House of Germar podcast, where wellness starts within. I'm your host, Jean Collins, and this week's guest is someone who is so special and inspiring, so I can't wait to share her with you. Samantha Yanks is this week's guest. I don't normally read people's bios because I find it's much more casual for me not to do so. But before we start talking to Samantha, I'm actually going to read part of her bio because it is so impressive and I don't want to miss any part of what's on it. So here we go. Samantha is the editor-in-chief of Westport, Weston, and Wilton Magazines in Connecticut, for those who are not local. Founder of content and branding firm Samantha Yanks Creative, and co-founder of the Connecticut Edit, a digital platform for Fairfield and Litchfield County's busiest openings, upcoming events, noteworthy creators, favorite shops, and philanthropic partnerships. Formerly the longtime editor-in-chief of Modern Luxury's Hamptons and Gotham magazines, Samantha honed her skills in fashion as senior accessories editor at O, the Oprah Magazine, and as associates editor at Vogue Magazine. Hello, I am so excited to talk to you. Welcome, Samantha, to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I haven't heard my bio read in a while, so that was actually fun.
It is kind of fun.
Nostalgic a little bit.
It is, well, and that's why I said it's impressive. And I would get some of those things wrong and some of those publications wrong. So I wanted to make sure I encompassed that. We are here to talk about wellness within. And so everyone knows how I know you. You were a moderator of an event that I did about my book. And I met you. And sometimes when you meet someone, you just click. And I just clicked with you. I just thought you were such a powerhouse, inspiring, yet really down-to-earth person. And people need to follow you, the Connecticut Edit, on Instagram, because every day you post the most beautiful photographs of life here in Connecticut. And it's so inspiring. That's why I really wanted to have you on the show so we can talk about your journey. So why don't you share with my audience a little bit about your background, your journey, a little bit about your career, and then we'll get into what you're doing.
Thank you again. And I totally agree. When you and I met, I was really excited, and congratulations again and again on your book. It's inspiring in itself, which is why I wanted to and was excited to moderate a discussion with you about it. And I 100% wholeheartedly agree on connecting with you. It was immediate. And I think probably what connected us the most are obviously the topics we're talking about today, both being super driven professionally, but also balancing that with kind of a healthy, calm approach to life. Career-wise, speaking a bit about that. Professionally, my journey, I was always super passionate about media and content and storytelling. And all of those words are really buzzy right now, which is probably what's kept me in my profession for so long. I knew from the very beginning that telling people's stories, the way that they are meant to be told and the way that they're going to resonate with the consumer and the public is really important for a brand. Brands really just can't be brands without great storytelling. And everything really goes back to a brand, whether it's a person or whether it's a product. And so from very, very early on, I'm not going to go back to my college days, but the only reason I'm even thinking about college days is I have a daughter who is applying to college right now. So it's top of mind and it brings me back. I haven't talked about college in a while, but I knew really early on that I wanted to work in media and had the opportunity to work at Condé Nast in what then was a roving program where you got to work 1 week for the entire summer at every single publication that they had under their umbrella, which was incredible. I see your
That
face.
is so cool.
Right.
Oh,
It's so
that's like
cool.
a dream job if you love the magazine industry. That is amazing. What a cool experience.
It was a dream job. Total dream job. So a week at Vanity Fair, a week at Vogue, and it was incredible. And that was it. I caught the bug. I knew that I wanted to work in media. Then it was either print media or television journalism. And there weren't digital platforms then. There weren't social platforms. There weren't all the options that there are today. So it was very honed in. I wanted to work in print and I wanted to tell stories. And it started very early on wanting to be in fashion. And I worked at Vogue, and that was utterly incredible. But what it really taught me, and I think what a lot we're here to talk about today, is work ethic. It wasn't about fashion at all for me. And it wasn't about being a lifer at Vogue and loving that piece of the industry so much. What it taught me, or what I will say to this day, not to like name drop, but what Anna Wintour from the top creates in that environment is an incredible work ethic, to be super committed to what you do and to do it to the best of your ability all the time. And that was it. That was my breeding ground professionally, and moved around not too much. I stayed in most of my positions for quite a long time because I made choices, I think, that were wise. They were very strategic, which is a lot of probably what we'll talk about too professionally. They were very strategic. I knew I didn't want to stay in fashion. It wasn't my calling, but media was. And I moved over to Oprah, and there learned a lot about television journalism from Oprah. I worked on the publishing side, so at Hearst and in the print piece, but we worked closely with Harpo and Oprah on creating what then was the beginning of the O list. And so I got into branding. And that was, how do you take a brand like Oprah and extend it even further? And so worked on incredible projects like that. And then strategically, what I decided was I didn't want to be as much in a national space. I really cared deeply about community, and the community that I live in, and the business owners there, and the people who make those communities tick, and moved into regional publishing and was the editor-in-chief of Hamptons Magazine in Gotham in New York for about 13 years. And
That's a
I can
long
keep
time. That's a
going,
long
but
time. Where was your daughter in this? Because your daughter is a junior, about to become a senior, right? So we have daughters of similar ages. My daughter is a senior, so we've done that college thing. Where was she in that path? Because magazines historically are known for, as you said, like, you are on all the time. You represent the magazine, from what I've been told. You represent the magazine. You are constantly on. You are constantly thinking about content and different things for the magazine. And when you have a little person, a child, that could be, I would think, very difficult.
very good question, and probably brought me to where I am full circle today, which we'll get to media wise, because now I do something with my daughter, who's now 17. But in the early days, I was the fashion director actually at the time of niche media. It is now called Modern Luxury, of about 72 magazines. And I was traveling all over the country, and I was a busy lady. And I think I was so busy that I didn't have the time to think about what life would be like once I actually had my daughter, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I think it does make sense to you. So I was just going, and I didn't really know how to stop at all. And my body didn't tell me to stop at the time. And when I had my daughter, I ended up having a C-section, which hopefully is not too much information for your audience.
Nope.
I'd never experienced anything like that at all, physically, the mental capacity. I felt like a failure all the time because I was like incapacitated. I couldn't do anything. But what was interesting about it, and I think I was in my 20s when I had my daughter, late 20s, but I was in physically great condition, and I didn't give myself enough pause. I went right back to work. I made a very conscious decision, which was quite interesting. And I'm not even sure what the driver was to this day, but I didn't take a maternity leave right away. I went back to work, and my thought process was, I was the first one out of my girlfriends to have a child. There's a group of 8 of us, and I was the first one. So I really didn't have any experience whatsoever with, what do other people do and how does this work? And so my thought process was, well, I'll just go back to work right away. And then when she's a little bit older and probably needs me more, I'll take my maternity leave then. I do the
Yeah.
stuff you could never get away
Never.
with whatever I cobbled
Of
together.
course.
But I cobbled together something. And, after 6 months, 8 months, I took off a nice chunk of time and spent some time with her. But for me, to what you're saying, my professional life was always my public life. They were very intertwined to a degree that I still have a hard time pulling back on. But I think that no matter what it was, my family was always the priority. always. I never did inappropriate things like a lot of people will bring all their kids to like fashion shows and things like that. I didn't do that. The two things were very separate for me, like what my professional life was and what my personal life was. But they did somehow weave together in a way that worked for the three of us.
Right.
I'm an only child. My daughter's an only child. I just felt it out. And whatever, my husband and I were very like transparent. Both of us had careers that were super important to us. But having our daughter was the most important thing. So I don't know.
Did you
I
ever
hope I
feel
answered
pressure? So
that.
you just made such an interesting comment that you were both very transparent about your careers were really important to you. Did you ever get pressure from family or friends? Because when you make that type of statement, you're saying family comes first no matter what. But this idea, I do feel like there's still really a stigma against powerhouse executive women with big jobs and having children because we know we can't do it all. And I think everyone just assumes the thing that's going to fall off will be your child in that scenario.
What I will say in that regard, I was very lucky. I have a mother who I'm still very lucky to have very involved in my life, who was a huge proponent of my career. And so that was always very helpful. And she was an amazing sounding board about that. And also a group of friends who similarly, and my group of friends, I'm not limiting it to the 8 kind of that are really like my super core. Beyond that as well, women who were in similar positions to me, whose careers were also important, but also I hate to say a lot of women who wanted careers who didn't have them and were very entwined in their young children's lives in a way that wasn't healthy for me. That wasn't something that I aspired to. So it was always trying to, and I think all women hate this word balance, but there isn't really a better word for it. It was always striving to figure out what that balance could look like and accepting that there isn't an answer, right? There isn't a solution. There isn't a playbook that you can give to anybody. Which is why I didn't read books about childbirth and I didn't read books about parenting. And I don't read books about giving career advice because there isn't one playbook that works for everyone. So no, I didn't have anyone who made me feel any shame around that at all. But I do know that it is a very real thing. And it's something I'm super conscious about as I go further in my career to make sure that the women who either I employ or who surround me aren't made to feel like one choice is better than another. It's like trying to say, I'm only going to do Pilates and I'm not going to lift weights. There's no choice that's
Right.
absolute. Those are clearly different choices.
But
Picking
there's
your
no
workout
wrong.
class.
There's no right or wrong.
But there's no wrong.
Exercise period is
No.
a good thing. It's okay. Whatever your choice
Yeah.
is. So were you living in New York
Exactly.
City when your daughter was born?
We were living in New York City. My daughter was born up at Mount Sinai and we were living in the West Village. And yeah, we lived in New York for the beginning 13 years of her life, and which was also fantastic because I grew up in New York City and my parents are still in New York. Yeah, so we were in New York for the first formative years of her life, and we had a weekend home out east, and so we split our time. And yeah,
What made you
yeah,
decide to
like
leave?
smiling,
What made
looking
you
back.
decide to leave the big city and come out to the burbs?
It was an evolution, I will say. I will always qualify this with we moved during COVID, and that was never our intention. It was just the trajectory of our family and very odd timing. But our daughter is a competitive tennis player, and that is a huge piece of her life. And something that became more and more important that she could be able to weave that into her day-to-day existence. And that is just near impossible. Anything is possible, but it became very challenging in New York City. And I was in a different place professionally. I had recently, a few years prior, left my position as the editor-in-chief of Hamptons. And while I was there, I couldn't really do my job without being
Right.
there. And I couldn't really do my job as editor-in-chief of Gotham in New York without being in New
Right.
York. From a professional perspective, once that chapter closed, it opened a lot of possibilities for our family personally. And we had been thinking about moving to Connecticut for many years. We have a family home in Litchfield County, and my husband's sister lives in Weston, right nearby us in Westport. So we had been coming to the area for a really long time, knew that we wanted to move. And I guess this is, somehow goes back to what wellness looks like for your family. But being an only child and having an only child, I bring it back to that because Sadie, our daughter, was a huge part of the decision making, right? It wasn't mom and dad want to move and you're just going to figure it out and you're going to move. And it certainly wasn't our daughter wants to move. And so we're going to have to figure out how to make our professional lives work around
work around this
drive
one
to play
human.
tennis,
Yes.
who's only going to be with us, sadly, for 17
Right.
years, right? It really was a decision that we all had to make together. And it had to be a moment that it felt right for everybody. And everybody wanted a Labrador. And that was not happening in New York City either. So for all you dog
Especially
lovers out
your
there,
guy is big, right? I'm assuming
yeah,
he's a male because he's so big. You post him on Instagram and I just want to hug him. He's like a gigantic teddy
he's a
bear.
big boy.
He's so cute. And I love labs. So he's so cute. But he's a big
boy.
dude. Yeah.
He's a big dude, and he needed a big dude home, and he needed big dude land
Totally.
and all those things. Yeah, so we made the decision right before COVID, luckily from a real estate perspective, just because I know that's obviously an area of interest for you.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of people who are listening from a real estate perspective, we got very lucky. We bought our home right before COVID, as luck would have it. And then we decided we weren't moving right away. We were going to move for high school for our daughter. And then COVID happened, and we decided we'd already bought our home. We decided no time like the present, and we moved. And we've been residents of Connecticut now for about 4.5 years.
Wow. And so we're going to sidetrack off your career, but we're going to come back to your career for a second. Let's talk about your home because your home is beautiful. So anyone who follows you, your home is stunning. To me, from the outside, looking into your home when you post pictures of it, your home has an incredible emotion to it. Not only is it beautiful, but it has an emotion to it that I can see in the pictures of your home. So can you talk to us about how your home feels to you and how did you achieve that?
That's truly, truly flattering and very, very true. And when you and I spoke at our discussion about your book, you said something that really resonated with me, which was about when you're interviewing prospective clients, and I believe it actually goes both ways for interior designers and for people in a lot of professions. When you're interviewing potential clients or when potential clients are interviewing you, you really ask, how do you want to live in your home, right? Not what do you do in it, not how do you use it all the time, but how do you want your home to make you feel? And that is the big driver in our house. First of all, we went from living in an apartment to living in a home. And we went from dividing our time in an apartment and a smaller weekend home to living in a larger house. But I still wanted there to be the intimacy. There's still 3 of us. And our house isn't full of kids running around and loud noises. And I wanted a space that felt serene to us, that felt comfortable, that we could entertain in and that we could have people over, that it was beautiful to look at, but most importantly, that it's filled with everything that's been important to us over the years and weaving that in with what does Connecticut mean to us? What does this environment mean to us? And it was important that we live near the water. And it was important that every room feels like I can't pick a room in my house. I feel like I'm squinting a little bit that isn't flooded with light. That was really important to us, right? Like I want to wake up to bright sunshine. I have very lovely, deep, dark drapes and all of that keep the light out. But I want every moment in my house where it can be to feel like I'm engaging with the outdoors from a color palette perspective to what does the landscaping look like outside to like how do we engage indoor, outdoor, and also in an environment that getting a dog, I know I don't want to overemphasize this, but was a big piece of our life and a home that he could be comfortable in. That I'm not saying he was a fourth factor in our decision making, but there were a lot of choices that we want to feel comfortable in, and that everything that we do is engaging with our surroundings in some way, shape, or form.
And your house. So I've seen your dog on the couch. I know that he's
allowed
allowed on the couch. Right, exactly. And you have a light colored couch. And you have light colored rugs. But you said something that I think is so interesting when you were talking about that, is that you wanted your house to feel like it was where it is, which it is a Connecticut home. It is a coastal Connecticut, very New England, very charming space. And you also mentioned nature and what's outside and bringing that in. And those I always think are such important factors in how we design, is keeping your home true not only to where it is, but also true to you as a person, and bringing the outside in, which I love, because sometimes I will walk into someone's house and if I don't see greenery or the outside brought in, I'll be like, so what's your aversion to plants? Why do we
Yeah.
not have any plants here? Like,
Yeah.
where's the greenery, folks? And where's the stuff that's alive? And you also make a
Yeah.
really good point, which is and your house is stunning, but you live in it, you use it, it has a life and it gives you emotion, which I think is so important. I love to hear that. And you love blue. Are there other colors in your house other than blue?
We do love blue, and it's interesting. Been across the board. My husband's favorite color is navy. My daughter's camp colors and now school colors are blue and white. My favorite color palette clearly
Blue.
is all hues of blue, but I love, love, love greens. I love pinks, the whole spectrum of pinks. My daughter is a huge kind of purple lilacs fan, and I love all all textures, all neutral textures. Like our wallpaper is a faux bois. I love like beautiful like burl woods, all of that. And yeah, so textures, color palette. I don't have any color aversions at all, but I would say there's one space that's kind of jarring in our house, which is our
Yeah,
gym. And I know, interestingly, you love to design gyms. I
I
remember
do.
you saying that, and I thought that's really interesting. It's probably the one space, probably the only space I want to redo in our house, because it is, from a functionality perspective, all it needs to be, but it's black and white. It makes you feel badly when you go
Oh,
in there.
no.
And no, just because it's so darkly than everything else in our home. And I remember you saying that, and I was like, wow, what an interesting thing to say, that you like to design gyms. And it's probably because it's a space that I want to be in, need to be in. All of us work out, right? That we need to be in, but it feels like a punishment in there because it's like black and white and stark. And like, I put this like amazing black and white photography in there, just not softening it
Yeah.
up. So we may need you to,
Well,
may need you to
I
come
I
here
do.
and
You're so funny because what you just said is so interesting. So, like a little design thing for people. We'll go on a little design tangent for a minute here, because I love my gym and I post my gym a lot in my home. And I feel so blessed and fortunate to have a gym that I love. And to your point, my gym has all the function that I want, but I also got to design it aesthetically. And my gym is black and white. And yep. But I have really bold black and white geometric wallpaper on the wall. So it's black and white, but it's like, hello.
right,
And to
right.
me, what I love about my gym, and it has lights, it walks, you can get outside. So there is actually a fair amount of light and a lot of windows. And the floor is black and half the walls are white. But for me, it's that geometric pattern for me is like energy. So for me, that energizes me. But I can also recognize that might not work for somebody else, might need something flowery or blues or greens or neutrals and really warm colors in order to get themselves energized. It is one of the fun things about design is it is so unique to the energy that space creates for that person. And that energy is not just about the physical surroundings, and the light and all of that does matter, but it's also how that person relates and feels about different colors and different things that are going on. Because mine is like bold, black and white, bold.
You know what? In listening to you, I think actually my struggle is that it doesn't have any natural, which probably isn't the severity of the black and
Yeah.
white, because it's
Yeah.
chic. The gym is
Right.
chic.
I'm
Give you
sure it
that,
is.
right?
Yes.
It
Right.
is, but I think it's probably the only space. It is in our basement, and it's the only space that doesn't have any natural light flowing into it. And the other spaces that are down there, it doesn't really impact you. But I think it's probably I miss having
Natural
natural
light.
light.
Right.
But then I just walk outside and
But then you
whatever.
need to bring that
Color.
cheeriness of the outdoors in
Yeah,
order to make it feel like you're not in a dungeon, because it is
yeah.
such an important space to be in and so important to wellness. And I say sometimes when I'm struggling to get motivated to work out, I'm like, just go sit down there, turn on some music and sit down there and then see how you feel about it. If you're really tired, you don't really feel like doing anything, if you sit down there for a little bit, see how you feel. And it is amazing how many times I'll sit down there. And then sometimes I might have like the best workout ever because I just sat in the energy of that space. And then I woke up and the music woke me up and the mirrors. And I was like, okay, let's go. Yeah,
Love
it's
that.
important to be down there. Your house also, I just want to talk about one other design thing and then we're going to move away from design. How did you get this skill? You have bookshelves, you've got all kinds of things that you post on Instagram about your house. You have this ability to layer things of interest that don't seem like I just saw them in Restoration Hardware. You have this ability to layer things within your spaces and within your bookshelves that are interesting. And I have a feeling that is a conscious collective decision as you're going through life and you collect things. Is it a conscious decision? And if so, how does that happen? How does that work for someone who is listening and is really struggling with how do I make my home interesting?
So I think it's a very interesting point. I actually have a fourth Instagram. Should anyone really need information on this, my Instagram Shelves by Samantha, or I think it is. I don't post off on it often enough. But I think it's Shelves by Samantha because so many people come into our home and comment on our shelfies or our bookshelves or whatever you want to call them. I just think shelfie is cute, and I don't love cutesy, but I do think that's a cute one. So I feel like there are areas that we each probably excel at in interior design, even if you don't think you do, right? Most people are very good at one thing. It could be deciding on color palettes. It could be having a great eye for art. It could be really amazing looking at window treatments and what do your floors look like, right? I am not great at any of those things. And so what I do, I think, with everything in life is find the thing I am good at and then just overcompensate, which, been in enough therapy about that, everybody. I love bookshelves because I think that they're a way to tell a story. And I guess that's just kind of the storyline of everything that I feel passionately about. I think that they're a way to tell a story and they're a way to group together different kind of curated, for lack of a better word, experiences. So all of our and there are numerous ones in our home, bookshelves all kind of tell a different story. So we have one area that is totally dedicated. It's totally neutral. It's all cream and it's 8 shelves and every single frame and every single shelf is neutral. They're bone, they're ivory, they're ceramic, they're made of pottery, whatever the frames are. We've had some made because super special experiences of places that we've been to, or I can remember exactly the store I was in Kent, Connecticut when I bought that frame, but it has a very distinct story. And the story is the frames and then all the memories that go in them. I didn't go crazy. I thought about it, making every single photo black and white. I couldn't do that because it took the
Right.
story out of what the pictures were, right? So the story there is this very neutral moment. And then all these colors pop out in each of the images. And that's at the top of our staircase. Everybody who goes upstairs sees that. We see it. It's next to the bookcases outside of our master bedroom. And they are something our daughter sees every time she goes upstairs to her bedroom. Anyone who comes to the second floor sees that. And it's like a very powerful moment of the story of our lives from the birth of my husband and I through to today, a bookshelf experience. And there are no books there. There's nothing else other than frames. And that's just kind of like a
I love
moment.
it.
And then the bookshelves that are behind
Yeah.
me, I'm sitting in my kind of library office. I've claimed it as my office. It's Wonton, and that's my dog's office. And these bookshelves are kind of just collected things they're through like the lens of a color palette. Everything you can see my ceiling too. Everything in here is chocolate brown, hues of blue, and textured neutrals. So everything in here from like rattan boxes behind me to urns to there are things that I've collected specifically throughout my career. And they are not like accolades and awards and things like that. There may be a few in here, but they are like baskets from a trip that I took to Paris on a business trip when I worked at Vogue, to all of my Hamptons magazines when I was editor bound in like chocolate brown binding,
Cool.
to whatever. I think that bookshelves are just a great way to tell a story, whatever that story is that you're trying to tell. And what I will say is everybody who comes into our home either compliments them, which is lovely, asks for bookshelf help, which is also flattering because it's fun and I love to do it with friends, or I just say go to my Instagram and look for some
There you
inspiration
go.
because I love
Right.
bookshelves.
Oh, and you're so good at it. And I love what you just said about your bookshelves can tell a story. And that I think is so important because that brings the emotion. It's not just these stock books that we buy and put there. If everything has meaning and emotion to you and tells a story about you and your family or anything that's important to you. I do have one shelf in my bookshelves that all the books are just about dogs and they're like dog bookends. And I'm like, random books about dogs that I just have collected over the last 20 years because I love dogs. And so there's this one shelf and it's just about the dogs. And that's okay.
I
And
love
that's
that. I
okay.
love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and then in those moments where and the moments do happen, right? Like where I have groupings of books as well, or groupings of objects or whatever they are. And there are actually moments where I think if they're grouped together and they tell a story, you're more likely to actually pick them up and look at them,
Right.
right? Because you're like, oh, I don't know, I'm thinking about inspiration for something. Or a friend of mine asked to borrow a book and it's kind of know where to go or what to do or where to direct someone. I cannot believe I don't have a grouping of dog books.
Oh, I do. I've been collecting them for 20 years. And a lot of them are just little or have quotes or pictures. And
Yeah, I
I
love
have dog bookends that like hold that. I'm like, I don't want to
I'm
sound
it's
cheesy about it, but
here, I will have it.
I love my dogs. When my dogs passed away, the oncologist sent me a book about dogs leaving us and the
Oh,
importance of dogs in life. And she had signed it, and all of the nurses had signed it. I have that too. And it just has meaning. Yeah. Not that anyone ever sees it.
sorry you
But
lost your dog.
anyway,
You know it's
it's there. So, one more question about your house, and then we're going to go back to your career because I think there's a lot there that's really interesting about what you do and your businesses. And I want to make sure we have time to get to that. What is your
a
favorite spot in your house and why?
I'm in
You're,
it for
yeah,
sure. I didn't know that you would ask
I
that.
know. So it
But,
makes you
no,
think about your house, right?
I'm 100% in the space that I love the most. I think in our house, every space has its purpose. I love to cook. I love my kitchen. I love to entertain. I love our entertaining spaces. Our bedroom couldn't be more beautiful. It's so serene. But all of those spaces serve a purpose. Like I'm in them to do something. We don't need to talk about my gym anymore because we all know the purpose and how much I'm going to absolutely about to like tear it up and renovate it. But every space has a purpose. And I go into those spaces and I feel like I'm specifically tasked to do something, self-inflicted tasking. But I'm in the kitchen to cook and then we're sitting at the dining table to eat. And then I'm going up to my bedroom to sleep. And all of those things. This space is library come office, whatever it is. Everybody in the house knows it's my space. Anyone who comes into my home knows this is my space. It is the most important to me, and it's the one I love the most because it's where all of my inspiration comes from. It's where I work both professionally. It's also where I organize for our family. It is the
Right.
powerhouse space, and it is very purposefully organized. I do not sit at a desk. I sit cross-legged in a big club chair, and that is super purposeful and thoughtful as well. I worked and sat at a desk for so many years. I hate desks. I don't like to look at
Right.
them. I don't like anything about them. I don't like desk chairs. I don't like desk lamps. And that might sound really strange to people, but for me, it's like I have this massive blue velvet club chair. I love the texture of it. I love the feeling of it on my feet. I love when I'm sitting in it and I have my laptop on my lap and it's where this is where I work. And it's also where I read. I have a television in here that I thought I would use to watch news, and I've never turned it on in 4.5 years. So I'm probably going to remove it and put a piece of art there
Yeah.
because it is the only piece of the room I dislike. And yeah, and it's big, but it's warm and it's just flooded in every direction with light. It has a glass door coming in and then surrounded by windows. And I just love
I
it.
can feel what's so funny is as you describe it, and I've seen some pictures of it that you post on Instagram, but I haven't actually been in that space. But as you describe it, you can feel the energy that room gives to you. It's almost like the energy of the ground is coming up to inspire you. And you are a very creative person and you work in a very creative field. And that's coming from within the floors and the walls and the furniture, or those are just the pieces that are there. But the actual room and light and space is energizing you. I can feel it from like the bottom rising up, which is so special. And that's as designers, we
Love that.
strive to get that. Wow.
Yeah, but you know what? It's interesting because, like, when you have that, I haven't had this connection with a space ever in any home that I mean, I've always loved where I've lived. So this is not a criticism of spaces we've lived in, but I've never had this kind of like energetic flow in a room before. and it almost becomes addictive and you like want to create it in every other space
You
and like you
can't.
can't. It just happens and you're like, wow, okay, you got to be kind of appreciative of what you have. So yeah, this is the
And
space.
every room can't have that same energy. It's not meant to, because to your point, some of the other rooms are task rooms, and that there's nothing bad about that, but that energy is going to be very different. Entertaining energy is very different than energy of a place where you need to be creative and really think and be with yourself. So I love it. Oh my goodness. You're gonna have to post some pictures of that room and that blue chair, because I haven't seen it. So I need to see those on Instagram.
Okay.
All right, let's go back to your career, because you decided you were going to leave big publication and go local. Talk to me about what helped you decide that going local was the right thing for you.
It was a totally pivotal, purposeful moment career-wise, for sure. I think what was for me, what was the moment I was at Oprah and we were curating what the O list would be. And I watched the transformation of businesses who were selected in that process by Oprah and how it utterly changed their lives. And what I found interesting was how it was changing their lives and how it was changing their lives and their communities. And how something that for them was this predated like Shark Tank, right? Which is a show I really love because you get to see people's lives like totally transformed. People who had an idea, whether it's a baked good or it's an airplane seat or it's a scooter or whatever it is, their lives are totally changed by believing in themselves and creating something and then getting public recognition for it. We were picking all of these items and changing people's lives. And I just remember living through that and thinking, that's like really what I care about. I care about the people and I care about the stories. It's not that I don't care about the product and it's not that I don't care about like how amazing their ideas were. There were many brilliant ideas, but it was like telling these people's stories and following up with them and seeing what happened afterwards. And that's when I just got the community journalism bug. I fell in love with getting deeper into the community that I lived in and getting to know what inspired people about the community that they lived in to cause them to create, if that makes sense. When I was the editor of Hamptons, there was a ton, of course, on the surface, beauty and glitz and glamour and all of those things. And that was a huge part of the story that we were telling as a magazine. But the stories I felt passionately about were twofold. One, people who are super driven philanthropically. I just have a deep, profound respect for that and hope to give back as much as I possibly can. So there was that piece that we really brought to the front, that piece of community. How do you give back? What are you doing? We really highlighted those people. So that brought me a lot of joy. And that's really only something you can do when you're in local media. You can tell big national stories, surely, but there's only so many of those big, really national, impactful stories. What people are doing on a local level, community wise, is really where the work is done. So it was the philanthropic piece, and then it was the creators piece. And it was before everyone used the word creators or before
Right.
everyone overly used the word community. And these are great words, and I'm happy that they're overused now. It was just it was the discovery. I love that discovery piece of finding what people are creating and what makes them super passionate to, in all likelihood, stop a big piece of their life to move forward and create a product or create a brand and make themselves really vulnerable and put themselves out there and be willing to have people like myself their stories. And that was like the massive community piece. And what I to be fair and to be like transparent and honest is I've really done that in a luxury lifestyle community. And that is a niche that I really specialize in and I'm really proud of. I'm not telling hard hitting news stories. I did not go to school for that type of journalism, and it's not the type of journalist that I am. I like telling beautiful stories in beautiful places and hid behind that for a little while. And when I got drawn back into it when I moved to Connecticut, I reversed the script and I was like, this is what I love. I really love being in beautiful places and telling beautiful stories. And those aren't necessarily from a luxury perspective. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Highlighting people in the communities that I live in that are of interest to me. And I have, in that regard, the luxury of being able to make that choice.
Right. And you said something so interesting, because it's like you didn't hide behind the potential shame in saying, I like luxury lifestyle. That is what excites you, and that's what you're passionate about. And that's what you want to report about. And that's not just all the pretty things, but it's also we're fortunate to live in a place where there are a lot of people doing a lot of good with that luxury. And I think
a
like you
100%.
embracing, like you're saying, this is me and I'm proud of me and I am proud that's my interest and what I'm going to do with it is important. And that is so powerful. Like you go. I love it. How did your,
Hey, took a
I know
while.
it
Took a
does,
while.
but you know what? But that's growth for people. So I have two questions. One is you've only been here for 4 years and I feel like you know everyone here. So for people that are thinking about going to a new community, what are a couple things you would suggest to someone who's thinking about going to a new community in terms of how do they get immersed in a new community?
I think it's a great question. And to be fair, I think I said this kind of when we kicked off is this is an area that we were familiar with, but we are very much the people, and I know everyone's not like this, right? There is not one size fits all recommendation here, but we are the people, myself as the driver of our family, most certainly, who I just throw myself into what I do. I throw myself into where I am. I throw myself into what I do. And I think moving to a new place should be hopefully for someone exciting. You want to be hopefully inspired by the new place that you live in. So we are less the family, I will say, that goes the traditional route. I think a lot of people move to a place like Fairfield County, for example, where we live, and the immediate thing you think is, I'm going to either belong to maybe a country club or I'm going to be involved in an area of religion, whether it's a temple or a church or whatever that looks like for you, or I'm going to become part of maybe a women's league. Okay, that is not our family's approach at all. To be fair, we do belong
You
to a
do,
country
right.
club, but
But I
like
love that.
that is not how that is not how we as a family learn about our community. The way I feel you learn about your community is you get in your car and you go. You just get in your car and you go, and wherever it takes you. Now, there is a blessing in Fairfield County where pretty much anywhere you go is going to be beautiful. What is it that is going to make your community amazing? For me, it always starts with agriculture and food. I really want to know what I'm eating and where it's coming from. Now, it was purposeful that we moved to a place where agriculture is super
Right.
important to the
Yes.
community. Right. So I'm not saying that if you move to a place where that is not a focus, this clearly is not the recommendation for you. But take with it what I'm saying, which is the get in your car and go, drive around and see what makes you happy. What made me happy when we first moved here. Now, bear in mind, it was COVID. So it was not a time where you could go to a restaurant and interact with people and just go shopping and you were meeting people in stores. It was a time where a lot of people were spending time outdoors. And so for me, it was like going and figuring out where are the farm stands because those were still happening where I love flowers. I love flowers to the point where it's a little bit crazy. So if a place was growing peonies, I wanted to be there. I wanted to take pictures. I wanted to understand where I was. And I wanted to understand like what, or for anyone who's listening, what is like really special and different about your community. And so I think just driving around in agriculture and figuring out places you want to be outside. I wanted to know where I wanted to walk. I wanted to know where I wanted to go when the weather was nice. And I also wanted to know where to go when the weather wasn't nice. What are places that are going to bring you joy in your community that A are free because you have to figure all that out before you start paying for
Right.
things, in my
Sure.
opinion, right? You don't need to pay for a country club to make you
Right.
happy. A country club can make you happy in addition, but like the places that make me happy and I think make other people happy are like the library in Westport. We have the most world-renowned, extraordinary library. And everybody goes there, whether it's because it's a beautiful space and it's calming and relaxing. It has an amazing studio where people record podcasts. Every kid goes there. I know this may sound shocking to people. It is where the cool kids go to study. This is the place, right? It is free. It is gorgeous. It is on the Saugatuck. So you see water all around you. I use as an example because you have to figure out to belong to a community, not necessarily being involved in the library. I'm not saying go out and dedicate your time to everything, but figure out places that are going to make you happy seasonally so that you have a foundation to what life looks like outside of your home and outside of your car. Because most people move to places and they're like, I need to decorate my house. I need to fill my fridge. I need to cook. Oh my God, the house is amazing. Everyone's going to be so happy in the house. And the house is amazing.
Right.
House is
Yes.
great. It has like
Right.
walls
But get
and like
out.
you got to figure
Get
out how to
yeah.
live.
Get
You got to
out.
live outside
Yeah.
of
I
it.
love it.
And also, you spend so much time, at least in Fairfield County, in your car. So it's like, what are things that are going to make you happy and let you meet people and engage? I've met a lot of people on walks in my neighborhood. I've met a lot of people at the library or simply just walking around town. And also, my tip for anyone, and I did it myself, and it may be the perfect segue. I did not plan this, but is to go on social and go on Instagram or go on Facebook or go on TikTok, whatever it is that floats your boat these days, and hashtag your town, your community, see what comes up. And usually there's a lot of great content there. And I guess a segue, I did not find that there was a lot of great content here. And so just started creating some.
So, right, which was my next question for you, which is how in the world did you create? Like, where did the Connecticut edit come from? And first of all, and before you get to that, thank you, because I think that is such interesting advice to get. I would have never thought of that, to just get out of the house and start to experience where you're moving, because I think there is a lot of fear as we start to get older and we think about downsizing or moving to a different place. And it's okay, how am I going to find my happy in this new place? And I'm leaving my friends or my family or everything that I've known as I've raised my child. And how am I going to reinvent myself and start over? So I think your advice about how to get connected and feel connected to a new community is incredible. And you are so connected. And honestly, half of the 4 years that you've been here, we were home in COVID. So it's amazing. Amazing.
Think the what like to what you're saying, and I think anyone listening, it's the same mantra really as what you're saying in terms of like how do you want to live in your home? Do you design for people in that regard? It's like how do you want to live in your community? If you're going to be someone who's going to walk a lot like I do, just start walking because nobody can create that for you. And then all of the pieces come together. I didn't realize moving from Manhattan how much I missed walking. It is how I generally kept off a lot of weight. I would walk miles and miles
Yeah.
a day. I was not a cab Uber girl in New York City. I walked everywhere as long as I possibly could. And so I had to figure out what was that going to look like here. It is not dynamic. I do not walk by
Right.
stores and get to walk into every cool store in the West Village. So I had to find a pack of people who I love walking with who inspire me in the morning or in the afternoon. Yeah, I think it's like as we get older, you probably know a lot more about what you want and what you don't want. I'm not going to belong to a random gym here because that's just not what I want to surround myself with. I think a very, very good point you make.
Love it. All right, let's talk about the Connecticut edit. Tell us, how did the Connecticut edit come to be, and explain to people what the Connecticut edit is, because it is so special.
Thank you. So the Connecticut Edit is currently in its current form about 4 years old. It solely lives really on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, and we have taken it kind of to another place where we activate events, and so there is that piece. But it is a kind of curation of information through the lens of my daughter and I. When we launched it about 4 years ago, she was turning 15 and I was approaching my 50s. And so we said, because for me, I always need a mission statement, and that's just who I am professionally. We need a mission statement and we need a target demo. So that took us about a total of 1 minute, which is our target demo is generally women. Although we have found actually that we have a very large male base, which I'm finding more and more interesting and liking. But our target demo basically was women 15 to 50. And we say that it's everything chic in CT. So it really is what we find that we love through both of our lenses, that we find beautiful and interesting and engaging, and stories that we feel either we feel passionate about personally or we feel that people's passion just resonates with us. And we have a big philanthropic piece to it, which is that we support a different philanthropic organization every month of every year. We announce them every 6 months who we're partnering with. And that can be simply from raising awareness for an organization to partnering on fundraisers to telling stories of CEOs or board members or philanthropic leaders. That kind of runs the gamut. But it's solely Connecticut-based content. It has its finite walls. We dip every once in a while our toes into Bedford, Hudson Valley, and we'll get comments. That's not what you're here for. It cracks me up. It's like
It's
over the
right there,
border
right?
of
It
our,
backs up to
it's
our town.
right over the border of our
Mhm.
town. So it was actually, speaking of agriculture, we were doing a story on 10 items that we love in a store that you could curate if you're giving a gift to someone that you want to give them all Connecticut-based grown
Love that.
products. And 2 of the products, although we bought them in stores that were in Kent, Connecticut, actually came from farms that were in New York State, which is, for Kent, Connecticut is literally the other side of the town is New York
Correct.
State. And we got feedback from that. Those are not really Connecticut growers. And from a factual basis, that is true. But we tell stories, we produce content about Connecticut. And it is generally through, as I alluded to before, through a luxury lens. We like for it to be hopefully calming, beautiful, and representative of where we live. And because I personally and my family has a passion for Litchfield County, we have a home there. We have expanded into content in Litchfield County, which, to be fair, is primarily during the summer. So we are teeing up a lot of that right now because it's a very active community in the summer, a lot of weekend homes. So yeah, so that's that. And we are, through really our community telling us that they wanted a lot of the stories that we tell a little bit more in long form. We are launching on Substack and we're launching our website and we will have a newsletter, and that's all kind of coming this summer. But it really, to get back to the root of the question, it really came from a place where I wasn't finding the digital content that I wanted about my community. And so because I do what I do and I create what I create, it just happened organically. And what I am not great at, and my daughter is really the back end stuff. She is, like all of our kids, great at
Yeah.
programming and creating websites and building things and tinkering with things. And I'm the creative one. I'm more of the storyteller. And she is a creator with me in terms of the content, but really the driver in terms of getting things up and running and making sure things stay on schedule and like all the important stuff. She's really the CEO.
I love that.
I'm like really the CCO. And she's really the CEO. My husband is kind of her,
Right.
CFO. And we're not hiring anyone.
No, you're keeping it in the family. You're growing and keeping it in
We're
the
keeping
family.
it in the family. Wonton needs a position, and
Exactly.
then we're like all done. That's really it. And it's an area that both Sadie and I are very committed to, very passionate about. And like all things, had no expectation of what it
Right.
was going to be at all.
But those are the best.
At all. It was just as simple as let's take an Instagram
Right.
handle. That's
Yeah.
it. And buy our website domain. Because in case something happens, just be
Right.
smart. I would say that to anyone. If you have an idea,
Right.
buy your website domain, take the Instagram handle, do the things you got to do. But that was it. There was no, oh my God, we're going to create this destination for Jenna. And it's slowly, and like everything, I feel like it's the same in every profession. Listen, I'm not a surgeon. Some professions have their finite, you're at the
This
top
is
of
what
your
you're
game
doing.
here.
This is how
This
you
is what
do
you
it.
do.
Yes.
Like evolving all the time. Some days we did this whole series on Connecticut-based artists just because it's something I really love. And it really took off. And we found out that our community feels like super passionate about supporting, particularly as we do on the whole first floor of our house are only female Connecticut-based artists. And that's just something we made a decision about. And so through creating content in our own home, we found out from our community that it's something that they care about as well and want to hear more about. So it's a constant learning curve. It's really, I'm not saying it's like there for the community. We're not 100% community-based decision-making here. But if people respond to something that they want to know and want to know more of, believe me, as I'm sure in your profession, people are not scared to tell you what they want
No.
and what they don't
Of course. No. To
you
share their
know, it's like
opinions.
happy to share their opinions. So it's the only thing I always say is it's a nice, healthy space. That's all it is. It is not a space for conflict. It is not a space for grandiose opinions. You may want to find a different space if that's what you want to talk about. We do not talk about polarizing topics. Tight, light, and bright.
Right. And you have a clear mission, a clear vision, and that's what you're going for. Is there anything on your bucket list for the future for that you want to try to do or accomplish?
I've always wanted to dabble in retail. I don't have any desire to be in a brick and mortar retail space, but we're having some discussions about what through our lens shoppability would look like. But I like everything I enjoy doing, not necessarily that I'm good at doing, but what I enjoy doing and have learned the difference as I've aged a bit. And I only really do at this point what I enjoy doing professionally. I'm very clear to say, not personally. We all do things we don't enjoy many times of the day. What I put my professional energy into are things I enjoy. I always want to just do something differently than it's being done before. I think I shop at and support so many amazing retailers. But if we're going to do something from like the Connecticut Edit digital perspective, I want to create an experience for people that's different than what exists now. And we've definitely been having discussions about rolling the concept out in different markets. So I haven't talked much publicly about it because I probably wouldn't 10 years ago, because I always think someone's going to come and
Right.
do
Yeah.
that, or someone's going to
Take
knock
your
it
idea.
off. Or,
Yeah.
no, I do not worry about things like that any longer. We've thought about rolling out in different markets, but one thing I've learned and what's kept me from doing it, and probably why I enjoy what I do so much, is because I'm here to do it. What makes the Connecticut Edit work is I live it and my daughter lives it. There is nothing that's happening on there that's either not an experience of ours that we're actually going through and showing you live or firsthand, or stories about people that we know and we trust so that we're telling you about them. That is very hard to accomplish in a franchise model. That's very hard to accomplish unless you are in a community and immersed in it. TBD on that, but there are definitely some discussions there. But happy with what it
Yeah.
is right now. And our community is growing. It's one of those things where anyone who's in any area or profession that needs growth or wants growth, sometimes it feels really slow. Sometimes it feels super stagnant. And then other times you feel an explosion and you're like,
Right.
it's like, I want every room to
Yes.
feel like,
Yes.
I want every experience to feel like that. And that's just not realistic. So right now we're in an amazing growth mode, and our audience and our community is super engaged and growing very consistently. And that feels good. But again, as we grow older, I know that's not what every day is going to look like. We're trying to figure it out, but it's a passion project. It's nothing more or less at the moment.
But it's a great one, really, that's making a difference and has an impact. Like everyone says, like, you're this resource. It's unbelievable. So before we go, because I've taken up so much of your time, I always want to share with my audience a book that has impacted you and your inner wellness. So what book would you recommend people go and read or download?
Okay, so this is the only question to anyone who's listening that I knew was going to be asked before this
Correct.
discussion. And as I said, absolutely no question about what I was going to respond with. But I have a caveat. It's really an author. It's not one single book. So my author is Young Pueblo, and every single book, and I have them here with me because if this ever is on video, and actually I mistakenly loaned my favorite one, actually, of the three to someone. But Clarity and Connection, of course. And by the way, don't you love the color palette? I mean, it
Love.
just
It
works
goes.
so
It looks
beautifully
great on a
here.
bookshelf. It works.
And
The other one, I think it's
lighter,
complementary color. It's complementary color there in yellow. Yep. Uh-huh. Yep.
totally. And Lighter, which is also a book of his, and also his presence on Instagram. I'm not generally into kind of like mantras, quotes, all of that, but I think he has a really powerful message. And if anyone hasn't read any of his books, they're really digestible. So I'm a voracious reader, and I can read, oh my God, fiction, nonfiction. I can read 1,000-page books. I don't enjoy them as much as I used to. I just don't have the attention span that I did long ago. But I'm a voracious reader. But what I love about his first book is Inward, which is not this cover, but the name is on the cover of this one. So Inward, Clarity and Connection, and Lighter, those three are for sure my books. And I return to them. What makes them transformative is they are the only books that I return to. They're not like one and dones. They're not you read one and you're like, oh, I have clarity and
Right.
connection. Oh, I feel lighter. You do. You for sure do. And I've yet to recommend his books to anyone who hasn't just head over heels been like, how did I not know about this person before? But they are books that I return to over and over again, and they're digestible. And a lot of them are in poetry form, but not
Correct.
poetry. So they're in mini vignettes or mini chapterettes, or I'm probably making up words here. I don't think chapterettes is a real word, but
it should become one. Yes.
that is now a word. But there are lessons in there that I think are applicable to probably everybody.
Yes. I love his work. I have not read all of his books, so now I need to go get the other two, but Lighter I have read, and now you're making me realize I should go and reread it. And I remember it being very easy to read. And I know on my copy, I have so many of the pages turned down, or I've written on the page, turned them down and highlighted different things, because he has a lot of words of wisdom to your point, in a very digestible format. And I also follow him on Instagram.
And he keeps
He does.
writing.
And I
mean,
follow him on
he's
Instagram
very
too. And
young.
I'm always like, you are just smart.
He's amazing.
You're just smart.
He's really
He's very
smart.
connected. He's very
through-
energetic. And he is a lot to offer.
And for anyone who he's gone through serious trauma. So a lot of what he talks about is trauma recovery and all of that in a non-doctoral, obviously, kind of way, in a life experience kind of way. Yeah, Clarity and Connection is probably my favorite. Again, obviously, 'cause it just sits so beautifully in my blue
I have
world.
to get that I have to get that.
But,
Yep.
yeah.
Oh, I love it. All right. So tell our guests how they can find you.
You can find me I feel like the easiest way to find me is on Instagram. Follow along. I'm at Samantha Yanks, and I am at the Connecticut Edit, and I am at Westport Magazine. If you would like to hyper local talk about Westport community there, or about anything, anywhere, I am a big advocate for Instagram, and I'm a big advocate for DMs. Feel free to drop in there. Say hello.
I love it.
Make a
I
comment.
love it. And we will post all of that in the comments in addition to the book you recommended. So I cannot thank you enough for being on. You are such a wealth of knowledge, inspiration. You have energy that is just contagious. And I highly encourage people follow you on Instagram, because your energy is contagious on Instagram. You can see it through your stories. You can see it through your posts. It's inspiring. Your love and passion for local and for health and wellness shines through in everything that you talk about. We didn't even get into cooking, and we could talk about that for a whole nother podcast. We could talk about cooking and entertaining. We could have a whole nother podcast episode, which we will do, on cooking and entertaining and how you do that. And because the things that you cook and prepare are mind blowing, but so healthy and natural. And you can feel that you have such passion in feeding other people and nourishing other people, which is so important. So thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. And we will have you back to talk about food and kitchens and cooking.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you. Talk soon. For joining us for another episode of the House of Germar podcast, where wellness starts within. We appreciate you being a part of our community and hope you felt inspired and motivated by our guest. If you enjoyed this episode, please write us a review and share it with friends. Building our reach on YouTube and Apple Podcasts will help us get closer to our mission to empower 1 million women to live all in. You can also follow us on Instagram at House of Germar and sign up to be a part of our monthly inspiration newsletter through our website, houseofgermar.com. If you or someone you know would be a good guest on the show, please reach out to us at podcast@houseofgermar.com. This has been a House of Germar production with your host, Jean Collins. Thank you for joining our house.